Hey everybody, and welcome back to Professional Development, the New York City Teacher Podcast. I'm your host, Noah, and I'm thrilled to introduce today's guest, Illapa Sairitupac, who I met a little over a year ago while working together on a project to keep a fracked gas power plant out of Astoria. I will state up front that Illapa is not a teacher by profession, but I think you'll agree he has a lot to offer us in this episode for a number of reasons, which we will get to shortly. But for now, hey Illapa, thanks for being here with us today.
Comrade Noah, how are you? So good to see you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. It is especially exciting to have you on the show because you are our first non-teacher guest. That said, your work is very similar to ours, so I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit about yourself and your profession.
Of course. So I am a social worker. I provide mental health care to residents here in Lower Manhattan. And these folks are low-income people who otherwise would not be able to receive this health care. Some of my clients are higher risk than others. My youngest client is 14 years old. My oldest client is 80. So we have a wide range of ages. And it means all the more for me that I get to work with my community every day. And again, many of my clients are struggling financially, so this is definitely the working class. So my work definitely further bolsters my commitment to our movement. I myself have lived in Lower Manhattan for 9 years, and I live on the Bowery. I live in a Chinese immigrant building where many of my clients are delivery workers. Many of my neighbors are delivery workers who work long shifts. So I have a lot of solidarity for them and for all immigrants in my neighborhood. They are the backbone of the city and ultimately this country. And I got into social work after, feeling a call to serve in this particular way after trying different jobs and different education routes throughout the years, and none of them were ultimately fulfilling for me.
And so on top of working as a social worker, you've recently embarked on what I can only imagine is an incredibly arduous side hustle, which is running for office. So could you tell us a little bit more about that and what led you to pursue that vocation on top of your current vocation?
Yes, so I am running for Assembly District 65 here in Lower Manhattan. My DSA comrades had approached me for over a year to run, and for a year I told them no. I thought they were crazy, and I was not interested at all. I was very happy being a social worker. I had no interest in running for office. I was very happy just being a regular comrade, very happy being a foot soldier for our cause. But every so often, these folks would check in with me and see if I was still swayable. And eventually I gave in when I realized that I would regret not ever having tried, and that the timing was good for me now to try it. And I knew I would not be alone. I knew that my most trusted comrades, my friends, would be fighting with me. Lower Manhattan, as I mentioned before, is the bastion of socialism, of leftism in our country. So to win here, to have a socialist representing Lower Manhattan, Lower East Side, Two Bridges, Nolita, Little Italy, Chinatown, and yes, Wall Street would be enormously meaningful. And it's time we bring back leftist politics back here where it all began.
Yeah, when I think of Lower Manhattan and its socialist history, I'm thinking back to like early teens, right before the Red Scare, when that was like the last time before now that it was when it was popular to say like, yeah, I'm a socialist. Back when it was cool, before about a century of it not being cool until Bernie brought it back, I guess, among others.
Yeah, we have an amazing history of leftist politics here, from our amazing Chinatown organizers to our Marxists from Europe that came over here and settled on the Lower East Side, to our Boricua diaspora who came over here, and made Lower East Side of theirs. This is where we come from as a city, as a country, and I will be the first socialist running for assembly down here in over 100 years, and it's very exciting, and we think the timing is good now. The time is now, and why not the working class gay son of immigrants to do it, who's lived here in the community, who's been on food stamps, who knows how it is to be at the mercy of capitalism. Why not me, and not just me, but me with a movement that I believe in. And we're very excited about this campaign, and we know it has a lot of potential, and we think we can really win this.
Yeah, I think a lot of the voter base in your community and in New York as a whole sees at least one aspect of themselves in you as who you are as well as what you do.
I'm very proud to have the DSA endorsement. We're working on, it's a whole thing of like going to different I've been going to so many endorsement forums, doing a lot of speaking events, and it's become the side hustle. It's definitely taking over. I mean, we knew this would happen, right? But it's definitely taking over all of my life, and so no more free time. But that's okay.
Right.
I knew what I was getting myself into.
I know that the free time is already limited, and so much of your mental energy is either used up during the workday or it's you're still running background tasks in your brain when you're not
completely
on the clock, if there even is a clock. So how are you making that work? And I hope you don't mind if I'm riffing a little bit, because I'm curious.
So a lot of lists. So that's the best way. I can't memorize. I have to write everything down, otherwise I'm a mess. So I make a lot of lists, literally hour by hour. So today I have hour by hour, I have a list of things to do. After this, I have a conversation with someone else, and then I have something else, and then it's like another meeting. But right now I have a campaign manager and a deputy campaign manager. So basically every day, every morning, we have like a nice check-in with those two, and we review my schedule for the day and what we're trying to do that day, and if I'm going to knock doors that day, if I'm going to do call time that day. Call time is when a candidate goes through the list of donors and they essentially ask for more donations. It's like part of the game. It's like not the sexy part of this, but it's part of the game. And so all these things, it's a balancing act. And I'm also still working, so I've been making my schedule very kind of top heavy in my early of the week, so that I have a few days that I'm not working. So it's like a lot of moving parts, but I've been balancing it so far. Fingers crossed I can keep it going. And yeah, it's a lot psychologically, but I can handle it. I'm strong, and as long as I get enough sleep and I eat okay, I think I got this.
Awesome. And that if there is any a very clearly transferable message that like any teacher listening to the show will be able to utilize in their daily life starting right now, I think that one was it. So thank you for that.
So much respect to teachers. I mean, back in the day, I used to work at a preschool, so I used to like teach little kids a little bit here and there. And I was making the lesson plans, right? But I have so much respect and I used to do after school teacher work too. So I have so much respect for y'all that just making the curriculums and just like giving especially in this crazy time of COVID. I don't know how you guys are. That's a whole different conversation. That's a whole like 3-hour, 4-hour, 5-hour conversation as to how you guys are holding up. But I hope you're holding up too, Noah. I hope you're okay.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I definitely hanging in there. Definitely finding a lot of good with the bad, which I think that's the critical piece. And so much of the show recently has been about COVID, so it's really refreshing to have something else really exciting to talk about. One of the first things I saw on like all of the social media feeds related to your campaign was a video in which you're bringing up the New Deal for CUNY and bringing up your support for the New Deal for CUNY, which was something that was news for me. I was not aware of it prior to that video. So I'm wondering if you could give us a brief overview of what the New Deal for CUNY is about.
No, totally. So the New Deal for CUNY is a piece of legislation that would restore CUNY to its original promise, a tuition-free CUNY, amongst many other amazing things. So the advocates for this see this not as some pie-in-the-sky fantasy, but rather a returning to what was taken away from CUNY. And in the Assembly, it's Assembly Bill A5843. A New Deal for CUNY would also increase the ratio of full-time faculty to students, because unfortunately, due to decades of inadequate public funding, the number of full-time faculty at CUNY has fallen dramatically, and instead has been replaced by temporary, part-time instructors and adjuncts, which is not the same. And The New Deal for CUNY would also mandate public funding to lift the ratio of full-time faculty to undergraduate students, and it would close the equity gap between full-time and part-time salaries. So we're talking a ratio of like 65 full-time faculty members to 1,000 full-time enrolled students, or about 15 students to 1 full-time professor. So this would align CUNY with national averages, finally. The New Deal for CUNY would also improve the ratios of mental health counselors and academic advisors to students in line with national standards. This is really great for me to support as a social worker who wishes they had mental health care counselors readily available when I was an undergrad. And of course, a New Deal for CUNY would make CUNY free again. It would eliminate undergraduate tuition and fees for in-state undergraduate students and replace tuition income with public funds. This is a big deal, and it's what made CUNY so important for the 100 years that it was free to countless students. So from 1847 until 1976, it was free. And then in the fall of 1976, during New York City's fiscal crisis, the free tuition policy was discontinued.
We've talked a lot about the fiscal crisis, so that'll tie in really neatly with some of what we've been talking about. Sorry to interrupt.
Completely, you're right. And obviously, to your point, free tuition will allow immigrants, the working class, and the poor the opportunity to attend college without having to worry about taking loans. And I see this purely as liberation, really. It's the least we can do.
Yeah, absolutely. So that student to faculty ratio is something that in the public schools, that's something we're always talking about, and the fight over classroom size was something that made some headlines this year for DOE folks in particular, just like figuring out how we can get students a better education. Like the first thing you start with is you just have to have more people there, and now that the pandemic really brought to light the importance of social emotional learning and having mental health services available to students, because that's one of the big things we talked about when buildings were closed to keep us and to keep everybody, all stakeholders involved, healthy back in March 2020. One of the big things was, well, how are we going to get services to students? And they need them, and we all need access to these sorts of services. So New Deal for CUNY making those numbers really, like the number of available mental health counselors, the number of faculty to students, making those numbers the key element is really in keeping with the conversation about education that's happening generally, which is just like, what do you want? Better education? Well, you need these resources. That's where it starts. Yeah, and one of the things I really admire about the bill is that it was crafted in collaboration between state legislators and CUNY advocates and the PSC, which is that's the Professional Staff Congress, which is notable for us because we talk about the teachers union, the UFT, all the time. So this is the union representing CUNY professors. And the PSC is a local of the AFT, just like the UFT is. So there's really a ready-made opportunity for solidarity there. We're both locals of the same national union. And so, we don't talk very much about solidarity in the field of teaching, but I think we should, especially in the past few years. It feels like teachers have sort of lived on the defensive with very little support or solidarity between one another and with other workers. So I'm wondering, how does the practice of solidarity, I know how it informs your life as an organizer. I'm wondering how it informs your work as a social worker, and how everything ties in. How it informs your praxis, I guess.
Absolutely. And I love how collaborative this bill was crafted, right? And it's going to take more of this ethos at these levels to empower our working class. And I love the idea of all these separate entities putting their skills and superpowers together and be like, no, we need to liberate CUNY once and for all. We got to do a reset on CUNY to make it work for all. It's fearless and it's game changing and it's refreshing that this sort of thing can still happen. It makes you less jaded, and the fact that it's so popular and such a non-brainer speaks to the importance and its practicality. And The only ones who want to block this are those who hate the working class and immigrants, period. I'm sorry.
Right.
And I see the New Deal for CUNY as an extension of the power of egalitarianism and righteousness, which are values that inform my work as a social worker and my organizing and yours too. And while I can't offer free college education to my clients, I can offer them a listening ear and offer different therapeutic techniques that I learned from my own education, which I wish had been free. I'm over like $80K in loans because of my college education, and had it been free, I wouldn't have this weight around my neck in the way that I do and many other Americans do. And it informs my run for office because I will fight to pass this bill at the assembly level. So it's a direct act that I can advocate for once I get elected, right? It's a nice little direct, concrete thing I can do and fight for. And this bill will give so many the chance to receive a free, high-quality education and will open doors for them after they graduate and pursue jobs that will help them take care of themselves. It's the least we can do.
So this is something that I've been thinking a little bit about recently, where, when you are working at the level that we're sort of working at as a social worker or as a teacher, where you have all of these really important interpersonal relationships and you're sort of just working one person at a time to try and get people what they need, which I think is really at the core of what we do as public servants. Like we're trying to just get people what they need. And at this level of the teacher or the social worker, it's on a person-by-person basis. And it can sometimes feel so daunting because the problems that we're attempting to deal with on a person-by-person level are systemic in nature. So this thing that you're doing right now, where you are both a person who's here to serve people on a person-by-person basis, whether they're 14 or 80 years old, just one person at a time. At the same time, you are going out and attempting to use democratic processes to solve the problems that are being created for the people with whom you work. I think that that's really just like taking the micro and the macro at the same time to figure out how to solve problems. And I really admire that commitment that you've made to trying to make those things happen.
Thank you. Yeah, I do clinical work, so I saw myself as more doing micro work, but this is definitely macro, what I'm trying to do with my run here, so it's a pretty funny contrast. I like the intimacy of working with people in this way as a social worker, but I also know that I always looked at this, the way I justified me running was always like, okay, well, you'll still be an organizer. You just have more tools and more powers and abilities to organize with, so that's what made it appealing to me. So I completely agree. Thank you. And so much respect to you, too, for the amazing work you do as a teacher and influencing all these young Americans. A good teacher is very memorable. I remember all my good teachers, so I'm sure you'll also be remembered by some of yours.
Oh, thanks. Well, one can hope. I certainly remember my good teachers also, which is how I ended up here, I think. But
that's right.
And so as a public school teacher, I can attest firsthand to this, which is the perceived lack of overlap between the world of CUNY and the world of the DOE. Like when you're a public school teacher, that's one thing, and when you're a professor, that's an entirely different thing. But when we started talking about doing this episode, I did a little research into the enrollment at CUNY, and it turns out that in 2019, 67.6% of enrollment at the senior college level and 91% of the community college level enrollment came from New York City. So for those of us working with high school students, many of the students with whom we're working, they just go straight from our classrooms to classrooms at CUNY. We certainly want the best for our students when they're in 12th grade. So I see no reason why we wouldn't want the same the year after. So I really see a major reason for public school teachers to be interested in New Deal for CUNY. Just because if we're thinking of the kids just next year, like what are they going to have waiting for them? We want to be able to tell them confidently, like, that, yeah, you can go and you will have what you need next year. Because it's really it can be kind of a difficult experience graduating students because you don't know where they're going. While they're at school, they're going to have what they need, or you can work hard to make sure that they have what they need while they're at school. But once they leave, you have no idea until they, come back and you find out either they did or they didn't. But so specifically for like on the student's perspective, how will the New Deal for CUNY improve the lot of students if it is allowed to pass into law?
Yeah, I think it opened a whole world of possibilities for them. I'm just thinking with my dad. My dad is a proud teacher at CUNY, and he teaches, computer-related courses, and he tells me how brilliant so many of his students are, but he also observes how it can be hard for them as immigrants sometimes to balance work life with school life. And as an immigrant, my dad also had to share that struggle in this country, and a New Deal for CUNY will improve the lives of people like my dad, an immigrant who came to this country who managed to get educated at a local college to open doors for himself. A New Deal for CUNY will liberate students from tuition. It will help improve their classroom sizes. It will properly pay full-time teachers who teach them so they know that their teachers are being well compensated, and that will also improve their education, right? We want a very present teacher who isn't struggling for scraps and teaching a class at the same time, because you can feel that. You can feel if they're not really in that moment while teaching. A New Deal for CUNY will be the sweeping change that's been waited for so long here in New York, and it's overdue, and it's where we come from historically. So it's a fight that we had over 100 years ago, and for over 100 years, and I can't wait for a New Deal for CUNY to become reality. And it was called, what was it called? The Harvard of the proletariat at one point. Like it was very highly, it was highly esteemed. It's not just like it's not just some random. It's a very, very important institution in CUNY, and so many Nobel laureates came from the CUNY system, and this is an amazing legacy we have for our city, for our country, and I'm so excited at this becoming a reality. And as a future legislator, I'm going to fight with everything I have to make it a reality, and I'm going to continue to show up. And we have amazing, New Deal for CUNY organizers who support my campaign as well. I was very honored to have them do like a New Deal for CUNY phone bank for Illapa a few weeks ago, so that was very sweet. And I've been to some of the YDSA meetings, and I've been to some of the rallies, and it's such a very monumental but universal fight that I have a lot of good faith that we're going to win.
1976 has been such a long time, and so much has changed since the 1976 fiscal crisis. If you look at the impacts that had on different elements of living in New York City and different elements of like government services, everything else has bounced back. Or I shouldn't say everything, but so much else has bounced back. Like the relationship between the teachers union and the city has gone through like 12 different iterations of problems and solutions since then. So like, why are we still living in the post 1976 Depression era in CUNY when everything else has had like several other cycles since then? It really must mean that the powers that be just don't like the poor, don't like immigrants, don't like anybody who benefits from, don't like teachers, professors, the people who are stakeholders in that institution, and there's got to be a change. So thank you so much, Illapa, for joining us and for sharing your story, as well as this exciting vision for the future of education in New York City. If the audience feels moved to contribute their time or other resources to your campaign, where can they find you?
That's very sweet. Yeah. Check me out at illapa.nyc. That's ILLAPA.NYC. And we have like lists of events, we have canvases, we have phone banks, all that good stuff. And again, Noah, thank you so much for having me. I know you're both very busy. I'm happy we were able to coordinate this. And I'm sure you had to go back to work right after this, and I have to go to another meeting. And this, we gotta show up where we can, though. So these pockets are important.
Right. Thanks so much.
Of course. Thank you.